In the grand scheme of galactic politics, humans were the new kids on the block, and like all new kids, we were eager to prove ourselves to the cool established species who'd been zooming around the cosmos since before Earth figured out that fire was in fact pretty neat. Which is exactly how 12-year-old Timmy Jackson became the first human exchange student at the prestigious Galactic Academy of Higher Learning in Unnecessarily Complex Mathematics. Timmy wasn't particularly brilliant by human standards. He once tried to microwave a spoon to make it warmer for the ice cream, but compared to most species, humans developed abstract thinking at an alarming rate. The Academy was intrigued. The Galactic Senate was cautiously optimistic. The Krellborian Empire was, well, the Krellborians were the Krellborians. Absolutely fascinating, drawled High Commander Vex Pora of the Krellborian Science Division, examining Timmy through a monocle-like device as the boy stood nervously in the Academy's processing center. A bipedal carbon-based organism with only 2 eyes and no exoskeleton. How do you even survive your own atmosphere? We just do? Timmy shrugged, clutching his backpack with one hand and a permission slip signed by both his parents with the other. His mother had been thrilled, my son expanding interspecies relations, while his father had been more practical. Try not to start an interplanetary incident, kiddo. Narrator voice. He would in fact start an interplanetary incident. The processing center was standard for all new Academy arrivals. A series of scans, some paperwork, or the equivalent tentacle work for certain species, and the mandatory delousing procedure. Nothing special. Step into the chamber, tiny human, instructed Processing Officer Grack, a 7-foot-tall insectoid with mandibles that clicked rhythmically when he spoke. Standard delousing, won't hurt a bit. Timmy nodded, stepping into what looked like a shower stall made of some iridescent material that definitely wasn't from Earth. He'd been briefed about this. Apparently most species carried parasites specific to their home worlds, and nobody wanted a cross-species infestation crisis. Made sense. Initiating delousing sequence, announced Grack, pressing a series of buttons on a holographic panel. Please remain still and try not to excrete any defensive fluids. Humans don't, Timmy started to explain, but was cut off by a sudden whirring sound. Now, here's where things went sideways. The standard delousing procedure was calibrated for species with, at minimum, a level 3 dermal resistance rating. Humans, as it turns out, barely qualified for level 1. The chamber filled with what the Krellborians considered a mild disinfectant mist, roughly equivalent to concentrated industrial-grade hydrochloric acid by human standards. The Academy's security cameras captured what happened next, footage that would later be played on every screen across Earth with the warning, viewer discretion strongly advised. Timmy Jackson, first human ambassador to the stars, dissolved into a puddle of organic material faster than you could say diplomatic incident. For 13 horrifying seconds, no one moved. Then Grack turned to High Commander Vex Pora and clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Vex Pora finally said, making a note on his datapad. Humans are so fragile, aren't they? Should we send the remains back in a container, or would a standard envelope suffice? Grack tilted his head. Perhaps we should recycle the biomatter, waste not, want not. And that, dear listeners, is how the most devastating interstellar war in recorded history began, with an administrative error, and a really poor choice of words about recycling a 12-year-old boy from Milwaukee, who just wanted to learn alien math. Back on Earth, Timmy's parents were enjoying a rare night out, their first since their son had left for space. Jim Jackson had just raised his glass to toast their newfound freedom, when his communication device pinged with an official message from the Galactic Senate. On, he said, his face draining of color as he read. Remember how we told Timmy not to start an interplanetary incident? Mrs. Jackson looked up from her menu. Don't tell me he's already in trouble. Well, Jim replied slowly, I think it's more accurate to say the trouble is in him. Or rather, he's in it. Or well, he was. The message was frustratingly bureaucratic, coldly informing them that due to an unfortunate biological incompatibility with standard processing procedures, their offspring had been unconstructed at the molecular level, but not to worry because this knowledge would be valuable for future human interactions. As a courtesy, the Senate had attached holographic footage of the incident. As another courtesy, they'd included an automated bill for the cleaning of the delousing chamber. 24 hours later, every news outlet on Earth ran the same headline: Galactic Empire dissolved human child, calls humans fragile, and beneath that, in slightly smaller text, Earth governments unanimously agree. Oh, it's on. The United Nations emergency session following Timmy Jackson's death set a new record for shortest deliberation in history. Typically, getting Earth's nations to agree on anything required months of debate, passive-aggressive policy memos, and at least 3 walkouts by various ambassadors. This time it took exactly 12 minutes and 43 seconds. So, said the Secretary General, a normally reserved diplomat from Ghana who was currently white-knuckling her podium, we're all in agreement. The Assembly Hall, packed with representatives from every nation on Earth, responded with a unanimous IE that reportedly caused seismic sensors in the building to trigger. Motion to unleash unholy vengeance upon the Krelborian Empire passed without objection, the Secretary General announced, bringing down her gavel with enough force to crack the sound block. Now who do we have that can lead this effort? From the back of the hall, a hand raised, the crowd parted to reveal a short gray-haired woman in her 60s, wearing what appeared to be a cardigan with kittens embroidered around the collar. Admiral Helena Steele, she introduced herself, walking toward the podium with the calm confidence of someone who had spent 30 years teaching kindergarten before joining the newly formed Earth Space Force. Retired educator, current head of Earth's Deep Space Tactical Division, Admiral Steele, the Secretary General acknowledged. You have experience with aliens. No, Admiral Steele replied cheerfully, reaching the podium and adjusting the microphone down to her height. But I have experience with beings who have no impulse control, limited understanding of consequences, and a tendency to destroy things for no logical reason. You mean the Krelborians? I mean 5-year-olds, Steele clarified. But from what I've seen, the difference is negligible, except that 5-year-olds eventually learn better. She pulled out a tablet and projected a tactical display for the assembly. The Krelborians have mistaken our diplomatic approach for weakness, our caution for fear, and our patience for inability. These are the same mistakes Billy Henderson made in 2043, when he thought he could eat all the classroom hamsters. A murmur went through the crowd. What happened to Billy? Someone called out. Admiral Steele's smile was terrifying in its pleasantness. Billy learned an important lesson about consequences. Within 48 hours of the emergency session, Earth had mobilized what would later be known as the Disproportionate Response Fleet. Every nation contributed resources, setting aside centuries-old conflicts in favor of a new unified purpose, making the Krelborian Empire profoundly regret their cavalier attitude toward human life. The DRF consisted of 317 hastily retrofitted vessels, everything from military craft to commercial liners rapidly outfitted with improvised weapons systems. Leading the fleet was the ESS Righteous Fury, formerly the luxury cruise ship Caribbean Princess, now armed with nuclear warheads where the all-you-can-eat buffet used to be. Is this legal? Asked Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reed, formerly the ship's entertainment director, now the weapons officer. He was still wearing his cruise line uniform pants with a hastily issued military jacket. Marcus, Admiral Steele replied, settling into the captain's chair and pulling out knitting needles and what appeared to be the beginning of a sweater. When a bunch of oversized bugs dissolve a child from Wisconsin and then ask if we want him back in an envelope, we've moved beyond questions of legality into the realm of necessity. As the fleet prepared to depart Earth's orbit, communications officers intercepted a message from the Galactic Senate expressing mild concern over the unusual mobilization of primitive vessels and offering to schedule a committee meeting to discuss potential grievances in approximately 3 galactic cycles, roughly 7 Earth years. Admiral Steele's response was succinct: "We don't need a meeting, we need accountability, and we're coming to collect." The message was followed by what the Senate representatives described as an unusual audio file that appears to contain primitive rhythmic patterns and aggressive vocalizations. Earth historians would later note that this was in fact AC/DC's Highway to Hell, the first but certainly not the last example of psychological warfare in what would become known as the Timmy Jackson Retribution Campaign. As the fleet entered FTL jump coordinates, Admiral Steele addressed her crew, many of whom had never been in space before, let alone in combat. "Ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary individuals of Earth," she said, her knitting needles clicking steadily as she spoke. "I want to be clear about our mission. We are not going to war because we want to. We are not going to war because we enjoy it. We are going to war because sometimes when someone takes something precious from you and shows no remorse, you have to remind them that actions have consequences." She paused, examining her knitting. "On Earth, we have a saying, around and around the planet goes, screwing with humans nobody knows." "Wait, that's not it." She frowned. "Fuck around and find out." "Yes, that's the one." The fleet disappeared into the jump points, leaving behind a bewildered Galactic Senate observation probe, and the first shadow of doubt in an empire that had until now never considered humanity worth serious attention. That was about to change. Ambassador Glarbnax of the Krelborian Empire was having a thoroughly unpleasant day. First, his third stomach lining had begun to molt at an inconvenient time during breakfast. Then his personal groomer had accidentally polished his carapace with the wrong shade of iridescent wax, making him look like he was trying too hard to appear youthful. And now, he had to deal with this situation, involving the new bipeds. Explain to me again, he chittered impatiently to his aide, why I'm being forced to meet with representatives of a pre-FTL civilization over a single larva. His aide Minx Poor nervously fluttered her wing casings. They're not technically pre-FTL, sir. They developed rudimentary jump technology 3 solar cycles ago, and they don't call their young larvae, they use the term children. Semantics. Glorbnax waved a limb dismissively. The point remains, they're upset about a defective specimen that couldn't withstand standard delousing. If they're going to participate in galactic society, they need to evolve tougher epidermal layers. It's just common sense. The Kroborian embassy on Centauri Station was the Empire's pride and joy, a soaring edifice of crystalline chitin and pulsating bioluminescent membranes. It was designed to intimidate, to remind lesser species of their place in the cosmic hierarchy. Today, it would host its first human diplomatic delegation. When the humans entered the Grand Atrium, Glorbnax was first struck by how unimpressive they looked. 3 of them, all soft and pink, with no exoskeleton or proper sensory appendages. They didn't even have the decency to secrete a proper entrance pheromone. Ambassador Glorbnax, the tallest human, spoke. I am Special Envoy Franklin Delano McAllister of Earth. These are my colleagues, Dr. Petra Novak and General Bruno Hayes. The ambassador allowed his translator implant to process this before responding. Yes, welcome, tiny ephemeral beings. I understand you're upset about something. One of your larvae disintegrated. Most unfortunate, but these things happen when inferior species attempt to integrate too quickly into advanced society. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Not literally, the environmental controls were working perfectly, but the atmosphere changed in a way Glorbnax found difficult to quantify. Ambassador McAllister said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, We're not here to negotiate. Glorbnax's mandibles clicked in amusement. Then why have you requested this audience? To inform you that your empire has exactly 48 Earth hours to issue a formal apology for the death of Timothy Jackson, make reparations to his family, and implement safety protocols for all species interactions. Glorbnax made the Kroborian equivalent of a snort, a high-pitched whistling through his spiracles. Or what, precisely? Will you write us a strongly worded letter? Perhaps impose sanctions that no one will honor. General Hayes stepped forward, a move that caused the Empire's security drones to shift position slightly. Or we will take appropriate action to ensure justice is served. Now Glorbnax laughed outright, a sound like grinding metal that echoed through the atrium. Your species can barely maintain a unified planetary government. Your technology is several millennia behind ours. Your military capabilities are frankly adorable. Dr. Novak, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. Ambassador, I strongly recommend you take this opportunity to de-escalate the situation. My dear soft thing, Glorbnax replied condescendingly. Perhaps you don't understand the realities of interstellar politics. The Kroborian Empire spans 73 star systems. We have military technology that could reduce your little planet to cosmic dust. You have, what? A handful of fusion bombs, and some primitive kinetic weapons. We're more resourceful than you might think, McAllister said quietly. Indeed, Glorbnax's compound eyes glittered with amusement. Let me be clear, we will not be apologizing for following standard safety protocols that your fragile spawn simply couldn't handle. The universe doesn't accommodate weakness, it eliminates it. Consider this a valuable evolutionary lesson. As the human delegation was escorted out, Glorbnax turned to his aide. Make sure the Galactic Media Network records my statement on this incident. The other species should understand how we handle upstart civilizations with delusions of grandeur. 3 hours later, the Kroborian Empire's official broadcast went live across all galactic communication channels. Ambassador Glorbnax, resplendent in his formal carapace adornments, addressed the 17 major spacefaring civilizations, esteemed members of the galactic community. It has come to our attention that the newly emerged human species has taken exception to standard procedural outcomes during their integration process. They have even gone so far as to mobilize what they consider to be a fleet of vessels. He paused for dramatic effect, antennae twitching with barely concealed disdain. We are, of course, monitoring this charming display of primitive aggression. Our military analysts suggest they'll likely attempt to throw pointy sticks at us, Or perhaps they've managed to harness the awesome power of chemically propelled metal objects. Laughter rippled through the Kroborian High Command, visible in the background of the broadcast. Rest assured, should these humans actually venture beyond their safe little solar system, the Kroborian Empire will provide them with an educational experience in interstellar realities. We recommend all civilized species continue normal trade relations, and disregard any human attempts at diplomatic outreach during this tantrum. The broadcast ended with the traditional Kroborian salute, a series of mandible clicks and antenna poses that roughly translated to superior beings prevail. 47 hours and 59 minutes after the human delegation left the embassy, exactly 1 minute before the Earth's deadline expired, Kroborian monitoring stations detected multiple FTL signatures approaching their outer defense perimeter. Ambassador, Minxpour reported, her voice unusually high-pitched, the humans appear to be responding to your broadcast. Glorbnax didn't even look up from his nutrient bath. Let the defense fleet deal with them. I expect a full report on how quickly they surrendered or were vaporized, whichever comes first. The report never arrived. Neither did the defense fleet's next scheduled check-in, or the one after that. Captain Rex Thunderpunch had not always been called Rex Thunderpunch. Until 6 days ago, he had been Robert Thompson, mid-level logistics manager at a shipping company in Cleveland. But when Earth's Unified Military Command issued the emergency draft, and he found himself assigned to captain a hastily weaponized cargo vessel, he decided a rebrand was in order. Captain Thunderpunch, his communications officer called out, "We're approaching the Kroborian defense perimeter. Their automated systems are hailing us." "Excellent," Rex replied, settling into his captain's chair, a modified office chair with duct tape reinforcing the armrests. "And what's our status, Lieutenant?" "Jenkins, sir, but I've rebranded to Laser Jenkins for the duration of the conflict." "Good man, Laser. Status report." Lieutenant Laser Jenkins consulted his tablet, actually his personal device with military software hastily installed. "Operation Bug Zapper is ready to proceed. Admiral Steele's flagship has signaled the fleet to synchronize attack patterns." The Earth fleet had split into 3 tactical groups upon arrival. Admiral Steele's battle group was targeting the primary defense station. Captain Thunderpunch's group was responsible for taking out the automated defense grid. The third group, led by Commander Sophia Demolition Derby Rodriguez, was heading for the Empire's prized shipyards. What the Kroborians failed to understand, fatally as it turned out, was that humans had been preparing for this moment since the first alien signal had been detected decades ago. Not officially, of course. Officially, Earth's governments had prepared diplomatic protocols and cultural exchange programs. Unofficially, every military think tank, science fiction writer, and paranoid conspiracy theorist had been wargaming first contact scenarios for centuries. The result was a comprehensive database of theoretical alien warfare tactics that had been collecting dust in secure servers, until now. Kroborian Defense Grid is powering up their primary weapons, Laser reported. They're using standard Gliese protocol targeting systems, predictable search patterns, just like the briefing said. Captain Thunderpunch grinned. "Execute pattern Alpha Zulu. Let's show these oversized cockroaches why you should never underestimate the species that invented break dancing." The human vessels, which had been flying in standard formation, suddenly broke into seemingly random patterns, darting, weaving, and executing maneuvers that made no tactical sense according to conventional warfare doctrine. What the Kroborians didn't know was that Earth's ships were following choreography from 20th century music videos, specifically Michael Jackson's Thriller and NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye. The defense grid's targeting systems, designed to predict logical evasive patterns, went haywire while attempting to track ships that were essentially doing the cosmic equivalent of the electric slide. "They can't lock onto us," Laser whooped. "Weapons are hot and ready, Captain. Fire at will, Lieutenant. Remember, aim for the joints." This was another insight gleaned from Earth's preparation archives, specifically from the section labeled, "Things We Learned from Starship Troopers." Insectoid species, even technologically advanced ones, likely retained vestigial vulnerabilities in their architectural and engineering designs, particularly in connection points. The first volley of Earth missiles, conventional nuclear warheads, modified with FTL drives, struck precisely at the structural weak points of the defense platforms. The explosions weren't particularly powerful by galactic standards, but they didn't need to be. They just needed to hit the right spots. Meanwhile, Admiral Steele's battle group was implementing their own uniquely human strategy against the main defense station. "Status of Operation Trojan Horse?" she asked, knitting what now appeared to be a tea cozy, while monitoring the tactical display. "Green across the board, Admiral," her tactical officer reported. The cargo pods are in position, and the Krellborians have begun automated docking procedures as expected. The cargo pods in question were standard shipping containers, exactly matching the specifications used by Krellborian supply chains. The Empire's automated systems identified them as routine deliveries and pulled them into the station's receiving bays. They really should verify their deliveries, Admiral Steele murmured. Start the countdown. Inside each cargo pod were not supplies, but Earth's special forces, specifically, the 15th MEU Marine Expeditionary Unit, nicknamed the Exterminators for this particular mission. The moment the pods docked, they burst open and unleashed 300 very annoyed humans armed with weapons, specifically designed to combat insectoid anatomy. On the third front, Commander Rodriguez's ships had reached the shipyards and were implementing what would later be known as the spray and pray protocol, essentially, firing modified pesticide canisters into the shipyard's environmental systems. I feel a little bad about this, Rodriguez remarked as she watched the canisters deploy. It seems almost too easy, her XO shrugged. They dissolved a kid and called us primitive stick throwers. I'm not losing sleep. Within 3 hours, the supposedly impregnable outer defense perimeter of the Krellborian Empire had fallen entirely. Human forces suffered minimal casualties, mostly minor injuries from troops who got too enthusiastic during the boarding actions. Back at Krellborian High Command, the first reports of the defense grid's collapse were met with disbelief. Impossible, Supreme Commander Zix-Trull chittered anxiously. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Nevertheless, his subordinate replied, antenna drooping in distress. They've taken the Helios Junction, the quantum shipyards, and he hesitated. Your personal vacation moon. My what? How did they even know about that? The subordinate's mandibles clicked nervously. They left a message. It's being broadcast on all frequencies. The message, when played, showed Captain Rex Thunderpunch lounging in what was clearly Supreme Commander Zix-Trull's private relaxation pool, sipping from a container of nutrient gel through a crazy straw. Hey there, bug boys, Thunderpunch drawled. Love what you've done with the place. The heated acid pools are a nice touch, though we had to adjust the pH a bit. Hope you don't mind. He took another sip before continuing. So here's the deal. We've taken your outer defenses, your shipyards, and according to this handy map we found, we're about 6 hours away from your home world. You've got 2 options, surrender unconditionally, or find out what happens when humanity decides to get really creative with pesticides. The transmission ended with what appeared to be human soldiers using the Supreme Commander's ceremonial mandible polish to shine their boots. As similar reports flooded in from across the defensive perimeter, the Empire's military leaders gathered in emergency session. The debate was short and pointed. How did they defeat our targeting systems? Why didn't our biosensors detect their boarding parties? Why are they so much better at this than they should be? And finally, the question no one wanted to ask but everyone was thinking, did we perhaps make a tactical error in our assessment of human capabilities? On the 8th day of what humans were now calling the Bug Squash Campaign, Admiral Steele's fleet reached the Krellborian core worlds. As her flagship dropped out of FTL, she set aside her now completed T-Cozy and opened a channel to Fleet Command. Phase 1 complete, she reported calmly. Beginning Phase 2, psychological warfare. And with that, every communication system across Krellborian space suddenly began broadcasting something that would haunt the Empire's collective psyche for generations to come. The complete collection of Earth's most invasive earworms, beginning with Baby Shark. Communications Officer Dex Wisecrack, formerly Dexter Wisniewski, assistant manager at a Portland coffee shop with a degree in media studies, was having the time of his life. Admiral Steele, he reported, barely containing his glee, Operation Cultural Bombardment is at 100% effectiveness. All Krellborian communication networks have been compromised. Admiral Steele nodded approvingly, putting the finishing touches on what appeared to be a tiny knitted insect with a comically sad face. Excellent work, Officer Wisecrack. What's their response? Confusion, mostly. Their communication patterns suggest they think it's some kind of weapons system they don't understand. Several of their military channels are discussing countermeasures for what they're calling audio-based neural disruption. The Admiral smiled. They're not entirely wrong. Proceed to Phase 2. Phase 2 of Earth's psychological warfare campaign had been devised by a special task force composed equally of military strategists and teenage social media influencers. A combination that would prove devastatingly effective against an empire that had never encountered human mimetic warfare. Across the Krellborian Empire, every screen, holographic projector, and neural interface suddenly began displaying what humans knew as the good stuff: cat videos, dad jokes, prank compilations, and decades worth of internet memes, all carefully selected for maximum cognitive disruption to insectoid neural patterns. On the Krellborian homeworld, the High Council had gathered for emergency deliberations when their secure chambers projection system was hijacked. Instead of tactical displays, they found themselves watching a compilation of goats screaming like humans. High Councilor Vex's Brax's mandibles trembled with confusion. What is this? Some kind of intimidation display? Are these the human larvae in distress? No, Excellency, a junior analyst replied. Our xenobiologists confirm these are different creatures entirely. The humans appear to find this amusing. The counselor's antenna quivered with indignation. They've breached our most secure communication networks to show us screaming quadrupeds. Before anyone could respond, the display changed to something even more baffling: humans participating in something called the Cinnamon Challenge. Meanwhile, on Admiral Steele's flagship, Dex Wisecrack was monitoring the Krellborians' internal communications with increasing satisfaction. They're completely destabilizing, he reported. Their military channels are in chaos. Check this out. He played an intercepted transmission from what appeared to be a Krellborian equivalent of a general. Cannot coordinate defense against the human fleet, because all tactical systems keep displaying something called a Rickroll. We've tried to analyze the lyrics for hidden military codes, but they appear to be nonsensical declarations of emotional commitment. Admiral Steele permitted herself a small chuckle. How are they responding to the cats? That's the best part, Wisecrack grinned. Their biological response is similar to how humans react to unexpected cuteness, but magnified. Their brains aren't evolved to process that level of adorable. We've got reports of entire military units rendered non-functional after exposure to slow-motion kitten videos. The psychological warfare campaign had been carefully crafted based on the limited data Earth had on Krellborian neurology. As an insectoid species with a partially hive-based social structure, they processed information differently than humans. Their communication was precise, logical, and literal, making them particularly vulnerable to human humor, which often relied on metaphor, exaggeration, and absurdity. Time to deploy the secret weapon, Admiral Steele announced, setting aside her knitting. Officer Wisecrack's eyes widened. Are you sure, Admiral? We haven't tested it on this scale before. The simulations were conclusive, she replied firmly. Execute Operation Dad Joke Apocalypse. With a few keystrokes, Wisecrack unleashed humanity's most groan-inducing weapon, a carefully curated database of over 10,000 dad jokes, puns, and deliberately terrible wordplay, all translated into Krellborian click speech, with just enough accuracy to be comprehensible while maximizing the painful awkwardness. Within minutes, reports began flooding in of Krellborian ships powering down weapons systems as their crews struggled to process jokes like "Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything," and "How do you organize a space party? You plan it." Their brains are basically short-circuiting, Wisecrack explained, reviewing the neural monitoring data. Their communication system is built on precise meaning. Puns create a kind of cognitive dissonance they're not equipped to handle. The coup de grace came in the form of Earth's meme archives, decades of rapidly evolving in-jokes, reference-based humor, and contextual absurdity unleashed on a species that had no cultural framework to process any of it. On the Krellborian command ship, Ambassador Glorbnex watched in horror as his crew abandoned their posts, some curled into fetal positions with their antennae wrapped around their eye stalks, others making strange chittering sounds that xenolinguists would later identify as the Krellborian equivalent of uncontrollable giggling. What is happening to them? He demanded of the ship's medical officer. It appears to be some form of cognitive virus, the officer replied, struggling to maintain his composure. The humans are weaponizing concepts our minds cannot properly integrate. Like what? What concepts could possibly? One crew member keeps repeating something about a banana for scale. Another is questioning why the chicken crossed the spatial divide. 3 more are debating whether it is Wednesday, my dudes. Glorbnex's compound eyes narrowed. Wednesday. What is the strategic significance of this temporal designation? Unknown, Ambassador. But they seem to associate it with a small amphibian. As the psychological assault continued, the Krellborian military infrastructure began to collapse from within. Without firing a single conventional weapon at the core worlds, the human fleet had effectively paralyzed the Empire's response capability. Admiral Steele observed the chaos with the serene expression of someone who had spent decades managing rooms full of kindergartners hopped up on birthday cake and juice boxes. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "the Krelborian flagship is hailing us. Audio only. Put it through." The sound that came through the speakers was the Krelborian equivalent of a desperate whimper. "Please," Ambassador Glorbnex's voice chittered, "make it stop. We cannot endure more of your memes and vibes. What are your terms?" Admiral Steele picked up her knitting needles again, beginning what appeared to be a small insectoid effigy with a white flag. "My terms are simple, Ambassador. A formal apology for Timmy Jackson's death, full reparations to his family, implementation of safety protocols for all species," and she paused for effect, "the immediate resignation of every official who referred to humans as primitive, or suggested we throw pointy sticks." There was a momentary silence before Glorbnex responded, his voice subdued. "And then you will cease your audio-visual assault." "Most of it," Admiral Steele confirmed. "Though I think it's only fair that your species be culturally educated on why your actions were so deeply offensive to humans. I propose a mandatory education program." What would that entail?" Admiral Steele's smile was sweet as honey and twice as sticky. "Nothing too strenuous. Just a comprehensive viewing of what we call Disney movies, with a particular focus on themes of respect, diversity, and the consequences of underestimating those different from yourself." The ambassador's surrender was immediate and unconditional. The Great Hall of the Galactic Senate had never been so packed. Representatives from all 17 major spacefaring civilizations crowded the chamber, many standing in areas normally reserved for ceremonial displays. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation and no small amount of anxiety, particularly among species with exoskeletons, who had been furtively researching human cultural practices for the past several weeks. "This formal session of the Galactic Senate is now in progress," announced the Senate Speaker, a gaseous entity contained in an ornate hovering vessel. "The purpose of today's unprecedented gathering is to ratify the peace accord between the Krelborian Empire and Earth." The way the speaker pronounced Earth suggested they were still getting used to giving the planet equal billing with established galactic powers. Admiral Helena Steele led the human delegation, flanked by Captain Rex Thunderpunch, Officer Dex Wisecrack, and Commander Sofia Rodriguez. They walked to the central podium with the calm confidence of a species that had just humbled an interstellar empire in less than 2 weeks using weapons that included cat videos and dad jokes. On the opposite side of the chamber, the Krelborian delegation looked considerably less composed. Ambassador Glorbnax's normally iridescent carapace had dulled to an anxious matte finish, and his antenna remained in the submissive "please don't hurt me" position that had become standard among Krelborian officials since what they now referred to as the human incident. "Before we begin the formal proceedings," the Senate Speaker intoned, "I believe Ambassador Glorbnax wishes to address the chamber." The ambassador approached the podium, mandibles clicking nervously. "Esteemed members of the galactic community," he began, his voice lacking its former arrogance, "the Krelborian Empire wishes to formally apologize for our significant miscalculation regarding human capabilities and temperament." He paused, glancing anxiously at Admiral Steele, who smiled encouragingly while knitting what appeared to be a miniature planet Earth. "Furthermore," Glorbnax continued, "we acknowledge our responsibility in the tragic death of the human youngster Timothy Jackson, which we now understand was not merely an unfortunate procedural outcome, but the unnecessary loss of a sentient being deserving of dignity and respect." A murmur ran through the chamber as many species shifted uncomfortably. The concept that lesser species deserved equal consideration wasn't exactly revolutionary, but having it stated so explicitly by a former imperial power was unprecedented. "The peace terms negotiated with Earth's representatives are fair and just," the ambassador concluded. "We accept them in their entirety, and pledge our commitment to a new era of interspecies cooperation." Admiral Steele nodded appreciatively before taking the podium. The chamber fell silent. Nobody wanted to miss what the representative of the galaxy's newest and most terrifying military power had to say. "Thank you, Ambassador," she began pleasantly. "The people of Earth accept your apology and welcome this opportunity to establish a more equitable relationship with the galactic community." She set aside her knitting and surveyed the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from various species. "I understand many of you are concerned about Earth's unexpected emergence on the galactic stage. Let me be clear, we have no imperial ambitions, we don't want your territories, your resources, or your subjugation." A collective sigh of relief rippled through the chamber. "That said," Admiral Steele continued, her grandmotherly smile taking on a hint of steel, "we will not tolerate being dismissed, denigrated, or endangered. Every human life, from our youngest child to our oldest elder, is precious to us. We protect our own. Captain Thunderpunch stepped forward with a data crystal, which he inserted into the podium's interface. A holographic display of the peace terms materialized above the chamber. The terms are straightforward, Admiral Steele explained. The Krellborian Empire will provide full reparations to the Jackson family. All galactic facilities will implement comprehensive safety protocols accounting for the biological diversity of all species. A cultural exchange program will be established to prevent future misunderstandings. She paused, her expression softening slightly, and finally, in memory of Timothy Jackson, we propose the establishment of an annual Galactic Diversity Day, celebrating the unique contributions of all species, regardless of technological development or military power. The Senate Speaker reviewed the terms before addressing the chamber. These terms appear reasonable and beneficial to galactic stability. Does any representative wish to raise objections before ratification? The chamber remained silent, though several representatives nervously adjusted various appendages. Very well, the peace accord between Earth and the Krellborian Empire is hereby ratified and entered into galactic record. This historic session is one moment, Admiral Steele interrupted gently. There's one additional matter we'd like to address. She gestured to Officer Wisecrack, who stepped forward with another data crystal. When inserted, it displayed a holographic image of a smiling human boy, Timothy Jackson. In human culture, Admiral Steele explained, we honor those we've lost by remembering them and learning from their experience. Timothy's death was preventable, the result of assumptions, arrogance, and failure to consider different biological needs. She looked directly at the Krellborian delegation. We don't want his death to be meaningless. We propose the establishment of the Timothy Jackson Memorial Scholarship, a program that will bring young representatives from all species together to learn about each other in a safe, respectful environment. Ambassador Glorbnack stepped forward, his posture straighter than it had been throughout the proceedings. The Krellborian Empire will fund this scholarship in perpetuity as part of our commitment to making amends. As the Senate session concluded, representatives from various species approached the human delegation with newfound respect and a healthy dose of caution. The Arachnid Collective quietly shelved their plans for expanding into Earth's solar system. The Cephalopod Consortium hastily recalled their infiltration specialists from Earth's oceans. The reptilian hegemony decided their invasion plans needed further consideration. 6 months later, the first Timothy Jackson Memorial Academy opened its doors on a neutral space station at the edges of Earth's solar system. Its inaugural class included youngsters from 12 different species, including a nervous young Krellborian whose application essay had expressed deep remorse for his species' actions and a desire to understand the humans who defeated us with cat videos and dad jokes. On Earth, life returned mostly to normal. The hastily assembled fleet was partially decommissioned, though several vessels remained active as part of Earth's new diplomatic corps. Admiral Steele returned to teaching kindergarten, though she now included basic lessons on galactic politics alongside finger painting and nap time. Captain Rex Thunderpunch, who legally changed his name after the conflict, opened a popular bar in New York called the Pointy Stick, which became a favorite hangout for veterans of the Bug Squash campaign and eventually curious alien tourists. In Milwaukee, the Jackson family planted a memorial garden for their son. On the anniversary of the peace accord, they received a package from the Krellborian homeworld, a crystal that when activated, produced a holographic message from thousands of Krellborian youngsters, each reciting what translated roughly as "We remember Timothy Jackson, and we are sorry." And throughout the galaxy, a new saying began to circulate among spacefaring species. It started as a whispered warning in diplomatic circles but eventually became common knowledge, passed from species to species. Be careful how you treat the humans. They're small, they're soft, and they might not have natural weapons, but if you harm one of their youngsters, they'll unleash a vengeance so creative you won't even understand what's happening until you're already defeated. And they'll do it all while knitting and playing with cats. In retrospect, many galactic historians would later agree that the Krellborians got off easy. They only had to endure 2 weeks of memes and dad jokes. They could have been subjected to TikTok dances,